Hello, and welcome to the Beauty Ritual Podcast. I'm your host, Eva. We are always discussing here the intersection of age, beauty, and identity, and today we are going to cross the subject of body trends, body dysmorphia, and we're going to update the iOS with our long-awaited guest, Brooke Spahn.
Hello, glad to be here. Yes, it's been a while. We tried to plan it, we made it happen with all the busy scheduling. I'm super excited to talk. I'm in private practice. I've been in private practice for about 10 years. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist, which sometimes I think can get confusing because people think it means I specialize in families and marriage. But actually I specialize in eating disorders, body dysmorphia, body dissatisfaction, body acceptance, and then addiction, process addictions, and trauma. So right up our alley today.
Yes. I know I'm in an arena that is very loaded. It's got a lot of history, a lot of evolution inside of like fashion and just society of what our bodies mean. But in the hair world, it's undercover. A lot of times people come in and the things that we end up talking about in the chair are so much more related to like a body image or self-image issue than it is about a hair color or a haircut. Even though those things can make you feel like so much better in a different type of self-care type of way.
Yeah.
Body image is a lot of subtly what you're dealing with in the beauty world.
Sure.
Now, I think today we are dealing with it in a much more sped up fashion because we can edit ourselves within the medical realm as well as just in the like topical retail sense. Because I consider hair to be more retail, and now we have a lot of medical adjustments that can be made to ourselves physically.
Yeah.
And what does that even mean to us understanding what it means to have a healthy body image today? I don't know where it leaves us.
Well, I think our society now likes to think we've evolved a lot, because nowadays we have the HAES movement, the health at every size movement. You see more body neutrality, body positivity on social media. And I don't want to say that that's not real, because that's very real. But on one hand, while there's this boom in body acceptance, and you see more people in magazines and Instagram and TikTok in bigger bodies, or what somebody would call a normal body size, modeling or getting acting gigs or just in the public eye. On that same token, if we're really talking about the current moment, on the heels of that is now Ozempic and Manjaro and all of these pieces that are kind of saying, hey, body acceptance, but like, here's another way to lose weight. And so in some ways, we've not changed at all, even though I think society likes to think we have. I'm seeing the same stuff show up that I saw 10 years ago. I'm seeing people able to look at, my clients in particular, able to look at maybe, let's go with social media for a second, take what their feed used to be of, not even models, let's just say friends that were in smaller bodies, or friends that had lives that looked a certain way and then they made up it was because their body size or the way they looked or thin privilege or beauty privilege. And saying even a little intervention of tweak of like, what happens, not if you unfriended your friends, but what happens if then your explore page or the TikToks you're following, what if you followed people that were in larger bodies or that were not models or that were not beauty influencers, that you then became insecure, that your skin didn't look like that your body didn't look like that, So it's like we can tweak those small interventions. At the end of the day, we're still, whether it was in magazines 30 years ago, or now on social media, we're still fed with like, the creams for cellulite, like, what is another one of my clients was talking about, like colon broom. It's like we're still fed the same stuff. It's actually more clever and
I would agree.
Way more enticing.
I would agree that it's much more clever. It's advanced, right? Science is making advancements. One thing I think would be helpful to understand, because the way you just referred to those adjustments, right, in our social media, that's not the root of body dysmorphia, right? And I think that I misunderstood that. Yeah. I thought a lot of body dysmorphia was seeing an image and comparing myself to it.
Sure.
Outside of that, right? But I think that I might not understand, truthfully, what body dysmorphia is and what body image is, right?
Sure. You want to dissect the difference. So,
where does it stem from?
Sure. So body image, right, is like how we see ourselves. So that's going to sound like body dysmorphia, but body image is how we see ourselves. So let's say, and how we feel physically. So those can actually sometimes be two
Emotionally or
different things.
physically?
Both.
Okay.
So let's go with that for a second. So let's say I look in the mirror and I look at an image, okay? And I'm like, I see a person that's X, Y, and Z height. I don't like the way this looks. My arms look like this. My legs look like this. I can look at a physical image, right? But what happens when I either put my clothes on or what happens when I am entering a space talking to someone, I might be aware of my body image, the image of my body in a different way. So I might have left the house looking at myself and going, okay, it's okay. Or I'm not in acceptance. I don't like these things, but like, all right, not bad. I feel okay. Let's go with that neutrality, right?
Yeah.
But let's pretend you and I are engaging in a conversation and actually what you're saying is starting to somehow activate me. Or like you're talking to me, you're my boss. And you're talking about how like these emails I sent, you would have preferred I sent them a different way. Now all of a sudden, right, we all store emotions in our body.
Right.
For me, my anxiety is always in my throat, always. So let's say you're talking to me and I start noticing that I'm starting to feel like really shameful. And I might start noticing that usually I store shame in my stomach or maybe I store it in my throat. And now all of a sudden I feel fat.
Okay.
And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, okay, let me try to and now I'm like overly conscious of my body, even though what's happening for me has nothing to do with my body.
Sure.
So now my body image has shifted. And now I feel gross, I feel fat. But what really I feel is insecure, shameful, right? But it's really, we're not often equipped with the tools that go, oh, those are the emotions coming up for me. This has nothing to do with my body.
Yeah.
My body's actually the same thing. That it looks, nothing different has passed since when I left the house 2 hours ago.
Sure.
But somehow I feel differently.
Right.
So that can be body image. Now, body dysmorphia, I think, is actually very misunderstood in society, where oftentimes body dysmorphia, first of all, it sometimes can be sort of an actual imbalance in our brain that makes us see something different than we actually see.
Okay.
But it's actually more about face. So there's a confusion often that body dysmorphia is like, I always buy a size large pants when I'm really a size small. Okay, so that's a dysmorphic thought or dysmorphic view of your body when like literally you have evidence that you're a size small.
Yeah.
But body dysmorphia can also be, I'm looking at my face and I see, sometimes people can report like I look like Picasso, or I feel like my cheeks are sagging when nothing is actually there. And so sometimes that's actually like what we think we see and we don't, and that can be an imbalance. It's not an imbalance in our vision, but it can be an imbalance of our brain wiring.
Okay.
And then other kinds the dysmorphia comes where there is the classic with eating disorders where you've seen I feel like everyone was raised in health class where when you saw the definition of anorexia, it was like a girl that appeared very thin and she's looking in the mirror and she saw a really large girl.
Absolutely.
That was what we all saw.
Yeah.
So that is also body dysmorphia in the sense that you're literally not seeing what's really there.
So I think now, in a modern sense, which probably might need to be updated now that I've heard those two distinctions,
Sure,
is that we all kind of, I say we, I'd say like my peer group and I, when I've discussed this, kind of preparing for this conversation, we've all sort of agreed that our version of body dysmorphia is going on Instagram, seeing the perfect Instagram girl and being like, I'm not her, right? Like, and that makes me feel these feelings of like, I need to change. I need to maybe impulse buy. I need to change tomorrow, right?
Sure.
So that's not the same thing at all.
No.
And here's the third
That's just body comparing.
Just plain and simple.
Plain and simple, that's body comparing.
I
That
mean,
is not dysmorphia. Dysmorphia would be looking at a girl that, and it's hard for you to actually know on social media if she's the same size as you, okay? Or same height as you, or same clothes size as you, which everybody is different, even if they're the same weight. It would be looking at a girl, the dysmorphia would be looking at a girl who likely with telling is the same size as you, the same height as you, and around the same body image size.
Okay.
And going, she's so much thinner than me. That's dysmorphia. That's dysmorphic. Okay, let's go. That's dysmorphic because I don't think we're seeing the same thing. Like your friend's going, what are you talking about?
Right.
You guys, what are you talking about?
Right.
She looks very similar to you.
Sure.
Obviously, you can't tell because we don't know if the picture's been edited or what, but that's more the dysmorphia. But other one you just described is body comparison.
But where does self-esteem come in here? Because when you describe that I'm the same size as this person, and I'm like, no, to me, like I feel like that's an issue of self-esteem where you are like, whether or not your relationship to actually seeing that thing is real, it's more so like I'm not good enough to even be viewed as this person.
Yeah. Yes. Or why do I view that person as pretty or attractive, but I can't see myself the same way?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that also reminds me. So yes, that's a self-esteem issue, but that also reminds me so much of like, have you ever given advice to a friend where you're like, I really should have taken that advice for myself?
Oh, 100, all the time.
Very similar too.
All the time.
Very similar, right? That's like, I'm not seeing, I can't internalize what truth probably is, but I can do it for someone else.
Right.
And that's sort of a human condition.
So this is a serious topic, but
Yeah.
when you were bringing up the differences between
Sure.
image and dysmorphia, body image and dysmorphia,
Yeah.
I was like, there's a third issue. Like I remember being 16 and going to get gas because I had school the next morning, and I had just eaten a sandwich with mustard on it, and I had mustard like that. Okay, right? I had no idea. And I went into the gas station, and the clerk gave me this look that was like, you made my day. Like he was living his best life. Like this man had never laughed harder inside, right? And I was looking at him like, okay, like I don't know what you want, sir, but just give me my gas, right? So I get in the car and I'm like, that was so strange, right? And I pull the mirror down and I'm like, oh my God, I have literal, like, it's a spoonful of mustard, okay? Now, I felt really embarrassed.
Sure.
Because rightfully so, right? It was horrifying, and I was like, I can't ever see that bald man with glasses ever again. Like, if I do, I won't live. And I should have more self-awareness, right? But I think that actually a situation like that is probably a healthy body awareness.
Oh, for sure.
And that's like probably a good, healthy baseline.
For sure.
Of like, just know how you look before you leave the house.
Well, and I think also there's the healthy, it's like, and this is what I tell my clients all the time, right, with body image or body dysmorphia or body dissatisfaction, is, by the way, no one's asking you to love your body, but can you get to the point of accepting it and then possibly not comparing it to other people? Does it have to be and also with that, am I allowed to care about beauty? Am I allowed to care about possible weight loss? And it not mean that I'm just trying to fit in with society? Or does it have to not mean that like I have a disorder? Like where's that line with, can I just have awareness or can I care about how I look? Can I do my makeup in the morning? Can I dress in a way that makes me feel attractive and it not mean I'm just following society's trends to feel esteemable?
Right. And also just being in a space where you can have other parts of you that shine more than just your outside. Yeah. Because like this, it's like I'm like astounded at like the intelligence and the compassion that is in this conversation right now. Yeah. And I'm like, that is just as good as the priorities that we place on our physical appearance.
Yeah.
So inside of that, do you think there's a moral issue in the beauty and fashion industry?
I do. I think that the conversations are still the exact same. So if we went for a moral issue, I think the moral issue is we do still prioritize. And I think the standards have changed, right? So I think before, if we think of like, it's just the easiest metrics, right? Like, so there was like the Kate Moss era or whatever. There was like where that body type was attractive. And then we've moved in an era of like big butts and curves and all these things are attractive, right? So that part shifts, and that's a trend, and that will shift back at some point.
Right.
But the fundamental moral issue is like, hey, you're not okay as you are. Yes.
Sure.
Whether it's you need to be thinner, you need to have more curves. The fundamental moral issue is you're not okay as you are, and our conversations are around that. I mean,
all you are is a physical body.
well, think about it, right? Think about, like, what is one of the first things your friends who you haven't seen with in a while say to you?
You look great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's okay. Here's my issue with that. Because and a lot of this stuff that I can't really get too argumentative about, but at the same time, I feel like we put a lot of pressure on saying the expected thing. And there's all of these memorized lines of what you say when you see people, and we just say it.
Yeah.
Whether we think it or not. Because it's like my grandma, my mom, my aunts, they all said that when they went to go see someone, and now I say it. And I don't even know why I'm saying it. Mm-hmm. But I think that line in particular, for the most part, is pretty much a rote, memorized thing to say.
I think that's true, but I think about, like, my stepdad's 80th birthday was in April. And my sister said that a bunch of people, she's older, she's about 18 months older than me. She said we had a bunch of friends come from out of town. And she said so many people came up to her and was like, wow, like, you look great. Or like, wow, like, I don't know if anybody said you look thin, but there was definitely like insinuation around that. She said she started to get so aggravated. And she said, and one of the reasons I was so aggravated was because, so what did I look like before? Like what? Right. So, or now next time I see you, if you don't say that, what does that mean about how I look?
Right.
And so I think the problem becomes, what can we say to people while acknowledging, like, oh, I love your dress, or like, oh, your hair looks really, what can I say that is acknowledging like a compliment about beauty, because we're allowed to.
Right.
While also not like.
And also again, from my point of view, I mean, all I do is get people ready. And you worked hard. So it's nice to hear, like, you look great. Because you know what? You put so much time, effort into the shoot, into the event, that, like, please comment.
But what if you said that? Okay, so what if you said that, though, even if somebody just came with no makeup and they're, like, sports leisure on?
Oh, my God. You could get such a mixed reaction. You could get someone just crawling back into their shell because they're like, no, I don't. I didn't do all the things.
Mm-hmm. Or,
I mean, could be pretty neutral. It depends on who they are.
I just think if we made it, so you were talking about how it's sort of colloquial now, like, oh, you look great. Or like some people are like, oh my God, did you lose weight? You look so thin. Or whatever, your teeth look so white. It doesn't, whatever the comment. What if we either, because it's hard not to say things like that, especially if you really mean them, or especially if you're like saying, yeah, I get people ready for a living. I want to acknowledge that. But what if it was said in not just like very particular context? Mm-hmm. What if it was not just said when we get ready? What if it was not just said...
Wasn't like a reward.
Totally. When we like knew someone had just gone out of town and went on a yoga retreat. I just made that up, right? Like, what if we said that? Or what if we said that, and maybe this is me as a mother of a 2-year-old, what if we didn't say that like after someone had a baby? Like, oh, you look great. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, you don't even look like you had a baby. Mm-hmm. All right, fuck off.
Literally.
Like, let's not.
Right.
And so what if it wasn't in just the reward as opposed to more of a...
I think it would lose its weight and like the gravity of what... It would just be a little less meaningful.
And then what?
It'd probably be relaxing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then there's also, speaking from like you... Let's say you're doing someone's hair, someone's makeup, and you, or maybe you want someone to comment on the person you're doing, like, oh, you look great, because it also means you did your work right.
Right.
Right? So, yeah, let's say that has now less merit. Mm-hmm. But, so let's go back to, you said esteem. But what if you had the esteem already to know, I'm a great hairstylist. I'm great at like, what if you already knew that what you do is great? So somebody commenting didn't need to land on you a 10 out of 10 to make it so that it was like, oh, I did the best. Versus like it landed more of a 5 or 6 out of 10, on a scale of how much you cared.
Right.
Because that would also mean you already have inherent worth.
I feel like I'm getting therapy. Well, I would say that it would make me more interested and more vocal about the other parts of my job that I love. Because the dress up and the costume aspect and the trend aspect and the creation aspect is actually more interesting than the validation aspect. And sometimes
Right.
you're even making a look that you know is not going to get validation. It is avant-garde, it is not popular, and it's going to be most likely polarizing. So I think it would definitely have me as an artist and probably other artists sit in more of that firm creationary costume and fashion ground.
I mean, that sounds pretty freeing and fun to me.
Definitely. I think with some of the complications that have arisen inside of fashion and medical merging is where we don't get to spend that time in the creation aspect, because when you can work on someone, and now it's very normalized in a set world, in a photo shoot world, to, be talking, the makeup artist and, the star of the shoot be talking about like, okay, like I edited this about myself, my body or my face, right? Via like the medical route.
Yeah.
Right? On top of everything that you are dressing that person with, right? Like whether you are taking Ozempic and Wegovy to be thinner, right? You're you could be talking about that while you're, painting body makeup on the skin. Like I filled my lips. I don't have a problem with any of those things, but it complicates the artistic portion of the job, because you start to sort of have a moral quandary inside of it when you go home. You think like, wait a minute, like, okay, if we can really modify to this level, well, first of all, it brings a neutrality of like, if you want to split your tongue or get a boob job, both of those things kind of feel the same to me now.
Correct.
That could be only my opinion, but
I mean, they're both modification.
They're both modification, plain and simple. I don't think most people view it as that, because one is more accepted than the other. But there's that question of like, should I change it just because I can?
I mean, you're saying an interesting thing. Are you almost saying what happens for you is, does it take away? So now that there's all these modifications people can do, so whether it's the Ozempic, the Mounjaro, or it's like I can go get my lips enhanced, or I can get my butt bigger, are you saying it takes away from what you could do creatively? Or are you saying it makes you feel like when you're adding more beauty on top of that, it's not real?
I think it begins its own track of what the story now is in the creation portion of this beauty industry, the art of it, right? And that meaning that if you have just fashion, you could create a silhouette with boning and material, and you can create big hair, small hair, sleek hair, curly hair, right? That's all topical on the outside of someone, and you do psychologically interact with it. But when you can add in the element of modifying your physicality, you're also interacting with the psychology of that.
Yeah.
And it's not I put it on and take it off. It's now I put it on and it's a part of my body, which is going to have its own health track, which in turn has its own psychological health track, right? And I think there's more pressure to conform inside of that. So that's where the art gets tricky. Sort of tricky, is like conformity.
Right. I mean, I think, again, if I circle back to the beginning of the conversation of like how beauty standards actually have not changed, in my opinion, unfortunately, is I think now we're adding an additional mindfuck. Because, and I was saying this to one of my clients recently, who's on Mounjaro actually, is she kind of asks me, like, what do I think about it? And I said, I make the joke, I'm screwed. Because, again, the treatment of eating disorders and body dysmorphia and body dissatisfaction, really, of course, there's a genetic component. There's the way we were raised. A lot of it's trauma-based, right? And so, but now we've added this piece where, well, I can just change that so easily. And now what does that mean as a treating therapist and clinician? So
what does it mean?
I mean, this is such a new thing for me. It's just started to come around where it's added this added mix, and I'll say for different reasons. So if I have a client that's primary eating disorders, binge eating disorder, and they're in a larger body, and they come to me and like, I can't stop thinking about how I would just want to be on Mounjaro or Ozempic. Wow. And see, this is where it's really tricky, because I want to help them get to body neutrality or body acceptance. Again, my goal is not always to get them to love their body. That is not a reality for some people.
Sure.
But what happens for me in this space is, okay, but you're in a larger body. And forget societal acceptance for a second and beauty standards. You're having trouble fitting into chairs at stadiums. You need a double seatbelt when you're flying. You have to, if you're going to an event, you have to scope out the space to see if you'll fit. So now we're adding in this, like, speaking from esteem, I feel so awful because I can't even like function in society, or it hurts to hike. So then the Ozempic Mounjaro conversation has now created for me, well, oh God, like on one hand, well, yeah, you could feel so much more comfortable. And again, not about your esteem, not about like, and now you fit in and you're loved and accepted, but like, oh my God, it would make your world, you would function a little easier in this world. And who am I if I'm also trying to help you find a way to function in the world in a happy, healthy, successful way, to say, yeah, no, don't do something that might make you function in the world easier.
Right.
So, but that conversation never existed before. I mean, it existed, but not about a medication.
Right.
It existed where I was like, okay, so let's talk about how to mindfully exercise in a way, or be more mindful if you're overeating and emotionally heightened. And it's okay if you want to lose weight, but how much does that take up your life in efforts to lose weight? So, but now we've added, it's a wrench. Especially for that, the population of people in larger bodies, it's created a massive wrench.
I never even understood it in that way, because that feels like a very human thing to want to like ease that experience.
Of course. And there was fen, there's diet pills, right? There's been things for centuries.
Sure, but this is even more because what I've researched about it is it basically stops your hunger hormone.
Yeah.
It would probably change someone's life if they were.
Yeah, and your reward system around food, because we all are born with reward system around food too. And so now it's like, as one of my clients that's on it talks about, and she has an eating disorder, and she knows I do not condone. She does not have binge eating disorder, so she knows I do not condone that she's on the medication. But the way she has described it, that I'm like, oh man, but I understand that part, is she's like, it's taken away the obsession.
Yeah.
So let's pretend it never made me lose weight more than I have,
right? But
it kept that obsession away. I'd want to be on this my whole life, and I can't argue with that.
Sure.
So that conversation never existed before. There was ever something medically that was like, let me take away the obsession, because it's sort of my job to help you take away the obsession.
Right.
And now there's a medical piece that can come in and help you take away the obsession.
Right.
Well, am I out of a job? But that's kind of what it brings up.
It does.
Yeah.
What do you think about people who don't have that disorder, that don't have diabetes, that are on it? Because that's
that are in like normal
more
bodies?
What I am exposed to. Normal bodies that are, just...
I want to lose 5 or 10 pounds.
Exactly.
Hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally understand the draw.
Yeah. Do we have moral responsibility here? I feel like
We do.
Yeah.
We do. And I think the discussion is so much more complicated than people want to have, because the discussion is, I get the desire to feel more comfortable in your body and lose 5 or 10 pounds, whatever that means to you. What I don't get is not using other tools that are also evidence-based, that are actually the hard work, like cognitive behavioral therapy, like dialectical behavioral therapy, like exposure prevention therapy, where you actually have to shift, and be more mindful, or think differently about your body, or think, like you were talking about, like, can we value other things that are not about our appearance? And so we're not obsessing about that 5 or 10 pounds.
Right. We love shortcuts, though.
But unfortunately...
We love a shortcut.
But unfortunately, that's the world we live in.
You sluts.
Yeah, that's, as you said, you're like, is there a moral issue? the moral issue is our desire for instant gratification at all costs.
You know, I wonder because I think we're going to begin to have this complicated conversation.
Oh, yeah.
We can't help it. We're going to have it.
Yes.
But I can't wonder if we will reach a more positive outcome by the end of it, because whether or not it's involving, you know, something like Ozempic or another drug, there's always a give and take with a drug, right?
Sure.
So there's going to be a lot of mixed data in terms of like how it actually affects the population. And I think that over the course of it, we could reach an interesting end in the future where we have a much more mature understanding of the application of a drug like this.
I would hope so. I mean, girlfriend, call me when you find it, because I don't know where that's going to be. But the only thing I can think of is when I was listening to you, it reminded me a little of like people who struggle with ADHD and who take a stimulant. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you said like you didn't think you used the word good and bad, but there's a helpfulness for a lot of people with Ozempic. Much like there's a helpfulness and need for some people who use ADHD medication to actually help them regulate and focus and function.
With therapy, right? And I've had that conversation with so many people that have been on it. They're like, without the work, it's nothing. The medication is nothing.
Correct. But then also there is, you know, Joe Schmo that's using it to party, or there's so-and-so that's like, it just helps me focus. It's like, well, great. But so you're always going to have somebody taking something and running with it and the other people using it for good. That's
probably the more realistic end to all this. Like, I have my Pollyanna overview of like, maybe we'll all be wiser, but actually we're just going to have chaos.
Yeah. It's going to be the same thing that it's going to be the same thing that it's like, there is a benefit and there's a cost.
You know who I think is at the forefront of responsibility with it, though? Is the fashion and beauty industry. And I'm not trying to call myself out on it, but I do think that where it could possibly be abused is in the limelight. Yeah. It's with people who don't necessarily have to take that route and who could be in front of millions of people projecting a really, really confusing, nuanced image with all of this medical luxury, because that's really what it is.
Absolutely.
If you don't need it, it is a medical luxury.
It's a medical luxury, and it highlights disparity too, right? Because who can get Ozempic? I mean, unless for some reason someone's insurance covers it, it's fucking costly.
Right.
So who can get it? People who are in middle upper class. Right. So now all of a sudden, let's pretend, so-and-so over in the Midwest, who is in low income, like genuinely needs it, and everybody else who's rich has bought it up. Sorry, there's none for you. Well, it's really limited.
That's why they've like frozen it in a lot of places, and they're trying to do like bigger political moves to sort of adjust for that. But I mean, we are seeing it.
But I agree with you about the fashion and beauty industry is like that is what's presented, right? And I think there's a responsibility there to be honest with you. I was watching Watch What Happens Live with one of the Real Housewives, and Andy Cohen was like, "You look great. Are you on Ozempic?" And she was like, "Sure am."
Whoa.
And she's like, "I'm not trying to show up to the reunion looking like, like bigger than all the other girls or something." You know what? She fucking owned it. And so at least also if from the beauty industry, say, you know what? When you're getting complimented or you're on the red carpet, it's like, I've had a lot of things done, or I do a lot of things to look like this.
That's so, you know what, that's a whole episode unto itself, is actually privacy. What you should be allowed to have privacy on, what you shouldn't be allowed to have privacy on, is like, who am I to say like what you should tell me or what you shouldn't tell me? But at the same time, there are instances where you feel like you should have told me that, right? Like withholding that information feels wrong, and someone owning it could have been the right move. Yeah. But that's all part of a vast game of dress up. I'm sorry. That's literally like what we're doing in this industry is we are putting things on, we're dressing up, and we're playing things out, whether it's in a fashion subtle sense and no one's saying a word, it's just posing, or if it's on a reality TV show. This is all costume, dress up, and fun. But
that's not how we internalize it, though.
it's not. Nope.
It's not how we internalize it.
It's so not how we internalize it.
Yeah. Which I think is unfortunate because, again, it goes back to, are we allowed to, you said, like, are we allowed to compliment? Are we allowed to like beauty? Or are we allowed to feel confident and good about if we're playing dress up and our hair's done or our makeup's done? Of course. Right? I think we're just not really taking this one step further. We're not also really taking a look at, with honesty. And I think some celebrities or people who have platforms are starting to say, like, yeah, like, here's what I look like without makeup, and I equally feel confident in both, which I think does inspire more people to say, like, okay, if that person I look up to is, honestly saying, somebody did my hair and makeup, and, or I have a trainer 5 days a week. It's like, okay, so now I'm understanding. So if I'm a consumer looking at that, I'm understanding. First, I could have some maybe envy that I don't have that. But now I'm having an understanding that, like, oh, it's not just that I'm bad or I'm wrong or I'm ugly. There's so much that goes into them looking like that to play dress up. There's so much that goes into that.
But I don't know if that changes the way that they feel. Because when you talked about, like, that first example of body image, right? Of walking out the door and then having that experience.
Yeah.
I think you can know all of that and you can still feel like, well, I should probably get a trainer 5 days a week.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course.
And that worry and that consuming of time and energy is maybe not right. If you're like someone in biotech that is like incredibly genius at what you do, like maybe you don't have to worry about having a trainer 5 days a week.
Right.
Right?
But that comes down to a conversation, not to go way back as a therapist, of like, how were you raised? What were your value systems in your house? Was it there's some cultures that it is a value system to appear and look a certain way. It is a value system, and there's other cultures that don't value that as much.
So if you have your own personal cultural experience,
sure.
Is it situational where it's outweighed by just society's current standard? Because I do think there's there's those levels of standard where you have societal standard, you might have your own cultural personal standard.
Yeah, I think from that cultural standpoint, if you were either raised a certain way or that is just culturally, I'm not saying it's right, but that is the way, like, that's something your culture values. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I don't think it matters what society brings us. That's always going to be a thing. But it's already ingrained in you. And now just these added things are like, okay, well, now I can change my face, I can change my lips, I can change my body, I can do all these things. But already that was a value system of mine anyways. And now there's just added things that are helpful. Versus somebody that didn't grow up with that value system, right? Mm-hmm. But then could have experienced bullying, and then that drew them to then hate their body or have body dissatisfaction, which then led them to disordered eating disorders, and then want certain things out of their image or appearance that's different.
I feel like we're coming under one big rule. It's no longer just society. There is a digital society that's part of this huge wave of standard and information when it comes to beauty and how you should look, because so many of us are interacting more online than we are in real life. Yeah. That there's like this new age of societal standard that is not walking down the street. It's digital.
Totally.
And that's not exactly ruled by like our peers even. I think it's more ruled by celebrity and in some cases even art, right? Because a lot of these like different avenues of inspiration for where people get their ideas for bodies are like cartoons and, like beautiful digital art, AI type things, right? That sometimes haven't like overly sexualized on both ends, like very sexualized, view of like what an image should look like. And that is really what feels so, I guess kind of like, as much as it's new, it feels like a dark age because there's just so much to unfold where we could like understand what that could look like in our lives. Yeah. But what do you see that digital age like on body image? Like how do you see that interplay?
Where do I see it going, or how do I see it?
Do you feel the seed of it now? Do you see it kind of unfolding just with maybe
Yeah, I mean, I see it
Every
worse than
age.
it's ever been. Yeah, I definitely see it worse than it's ever been. So I'm even thinking about myself, and when I was in middle school, high school, it didn't exist. You know, maybe there was MySpace. There wasn't the same comparison. There wasn't the same beauty standards, and there wasn't the same access. There wasn't the same editing, right?
Right.
And so now that social piece is now, I mean, also I can feel a certain way if I edit something. So now I feel differently about myself because I've edited that.
Right.
And I've put it out in the world.
Right.
I think it's really complicated. It makes me very fearful for my daughter. My husband and I are make it a really big priority to, yes, we'll say like, you're pretty or you look cute. But when we do like affirmation or we're talking to her, you're so smart, you know, you're kind. That you're intelligent. You're so curious. As opposed to, you know, I joked with my husband, I took my daughter to tour a Montessori school where we live. And my daughter's beautiful. She's blonde. She has bright blue eyes. She's long hair. She's beautiful. But she's also curious. She's all these other things. And we were touring the school, and she walked in, and she immediately ran around and was like playing with their toys. She was not afraid. She was not shy. And we ran into about 5 different teachers in like the span of touring the school. Every single one of them, she's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. And I left, and my husband's like, how was it? I said, we're not sending her there. And he's like, well, why? I said, because 5 people commented, she's so beautiful. Not one teacher or the headmaster, whatever, not one person said, oh, she's so curious. Look at her. She's going to explore. Or she's not afraid. She doesn't know any of these kids. Wow. You know, like, look at her. She has no fear. Or she's really, or even just making an observation comment. Oh, she's so interested in those blocks. That's just a neutral observational comment. 5 different teachers in the span of maybe 30 minutes. She's so beautiful. I was like, absolutely not. That is not the message I want her to receive at all. It is okay. I can't control what comes out of people's mouths if they're going to tell her that. I can't control if the girl grows up and she wants to model. I can't control if people, that's how society views her, by her looks. What I can control is what happens in my home. And I can control how we talk to her because she's entering a world that she's going to see images or when she gets her phone. I mean, that's creating a big challenge for parents this age.
You know, I find it so interesting. I've had a few mentors in my life just in doing hair that have been incredibly helpful to me. And I had a relationship with a client that she always felt so poorly about herself, and she was the most beautiful girl you'd ever seen. So gorgeous. I feel like I've told this story before. And I was always so excited to do her hair. I was so excited to make her look beautiful.
Sure.
And I could never, at the end of a session, like, change the way that she felt, right? Even though I would try my hardest, it almost felt like everything I did fell flat.
Sure.
And eventually I was like, I don't know if I'm even the right fit to do, to do hair for this person, because like nothing I'm doing is landing right, which is fair. Like, you might find a different hairdresser who's better for you, right? And I had always had that question in my head after that experience of like, what was it, right? Was it the blow dry? And one of my mentors said, he goes, can you imagine if someone only ever told you were beautiful? And I had stopped in my tracks because that wasn't my experience. I was told a lot of things, right? And, I obviously got compliments like any normal girl, like you're pretty, you're cute occasionally, right?
Sure.
But I never thought about how much pressure it would be to be like, you're beautiful, you're pretty, you're beautiful, you're pretty, right?
Yeah.
And how one bad day could take all that away from you.
Yeah.
And that some people will internalize that and flip it around and be like, I'm ugly. And I'm not saying everybody does that, but it was that one experience that taught me like, whoa, that's a different experience of life to have that pressure on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to grow out of it, I don't even know what that looks like. Because I got called a whole bunch of things. Tenacious, perhaps. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
we're circling around a very, very deep question that I don't think is even fully formed, but it might have something to do with, like, what is our responsibility as a human to be a human, right? Because we can be so many creative things, and we can lose sight of what we're doing when we play dress up, when we start to create this like avatar and character in our lives that is either playing out in the digital realm or the real realm, right? And with the like medical interventions, we can now really truly be that avatar if we want, right? We could put spikes on our heads, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's a question of like, you know, if we're redefining humanity, let's truly redefine humanity at its heart.
Yeah, and I think this sounds really cheesy, or simple. But I truly think it starts with, okay, if I'm speaking from this generation itself, it starts with the parents. You know, we have to start having different conversations with our kids as young as can be, and we have to start instilling, you talked about self-esteem, we have to start instilling other ways of having the internal self-esteem enough that when we see those images, or when we're playing dress up, just any piece that, like, yes, I'm allowed to feel good, or yes, I kind of wish I looked like that, or I would love that, or I want to dye my hair that color, I liked the way it looked there. But at the core, my day isn't ruined, my week isn't ruined, I'm not any less than of a human because I can't look like that. Or because I don't have the money to do that thing that everyone's doing, right? And that starts with how we parent our kids. And and then it's just ground up.
It's perfection. I have a hard question for you as we end.
Yes.
What do you think the healthiest mindset is if someone actually wants to play with a medical intervention for luxury's sake only?
Sure.
Whether it's lip filler, Botox, boob job, Ozempic, like what would you see that as?
I think it is okay, and I understand, and I would support somebody wanting to feel more comfortable in their skin, or actually just wanting change, or wanting more of or less of something. My guideline, or my question would be, and my question I would sort of like ask a viewer, or I would say is, so let's pretend you didn't do that. Let's pretend you didn't get your lips done. Let's pretend you didn't get Ozempic. Are you going to be okay, regardless? Or like, how much time are you spending obsessing about that? If we're now, we're spending 80% of our day thinking about how that thing we don't like, or that thing sucks, or I hate that thing, I wouldn't do it. And I say that because you're going to change it, and then it's going to be a moving target you can't hit, and then it's going to move, and then it's going to go, oh, well, now I like that thing. But now that I can see that I can change that and I like that thing, I want to change something else. It's a target you can't ever really hit. Versus if you're like, I've always been kind of insecure that I have a small chest. It's not my favorite thing. I'm totally happy. I'm, married or not married, but happy in my life. Have kids, don't have kids. Like my job. I overall have a pretty happy life. I've never felt that confident. But again, it is not this rumination obsession. Go get your boobs done.
Girl, preach. Thank you for that. Yeah. Brooke, that was incredible. I have to listen to this whole episode over again because I got so much just in like speaking with you right now that I'm like, my mind is ready to go back and listen from the beginning.
Love it.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Beauty Ritual Podcast. Brooke, can we please find you? Where can we find you?
Oh, you can't find me anywhere.
She's a mystery.
No, I'm totally private because I'm a therapist and I don't have social media in that way. You can essentially Google my name and find my website if you want therapy, but otherwise I don't do the social media piece. And somebody asked me that recently. They're like, so do you have like an Instagram? I'm like, absolutely not.
Well,
Google my name. That's all I got.
That's all we need. Thank you again for being here.
Of course. Thank you.
And we'll see you all next time.